Hello and welcome to this short screencast on The Great Gatsby. And on this screencast we're going to be focusing on the opening of Chapter 3. We're particularly looking at narrative perspective, so although we're looking at lots of different features and lots of different language devices, this should all contribute to your understanding of the narrative perspective. As you hopefully know by now, the narrator is Nick Carraway. And one of the first things to pick up from in the opening of Chapter 3 is this first line. There was music from my neighbour's house. Here we see Nick refer to Gatsby as my neighbour. That's quite a detached narrative voice at this point. He's not personalised it as Gatsby's mansion, Gatsby's house. Therefore, that might lead us to think that Nick is being quite distant, quite sceptical, and quite detached at this point in the narrative. Remember as well that as readers, we've not properly met Gatsby yet, and so we are relying on Nick to give us an impression of his neighbour. In the next line, we see this reference to his blue gardens where men and girls came and went. And I'm interested in that line, men and girls, because here essentially men get to be men, grown-up men, but girls get to just remain girls. They aren't referred to as women. This hints again at perhaps Nick's disdain, his detachment from what's going on, but also perhaps hints at something at his misogyny. You know, if he refers to women as girls, then that might be a colloquial thing, but it might also be him kind of looking down on them. We also encounter our first simile here in this line, that the men and girls came and went like moths. Nick's simile here is used to dehumanise the visitors. If they're like moths, then they're no longer like humans. They're like moths perhaps because they're attracted to the light of Gatsby's mansion. Gatsby's mansion, you know, the lights kind of shine out across the sea, and lights are a really important symbol in this novel. You know, it's a really important extended metaphor in this novel. So they're attracted to the light. I wonder actually we could push this idea even further. Like moths, I wonder, do Gatsby's visitors, are they in danger of getting too close to the light? Are they in danger of getting burned? And I wonder if that's an idea that Fitzgerald or Nick wants us to pursue. Moving on, we see examples here of what's called syndetic listing, when you get the repeated use of the word and. So we've got went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. And this is a feature that we're going to notice again later on in the passage. This serves to emphasise perhaps the excessiveness of these parties, that this thing happens and this thing and this thing, perhaps hinting at Nick's frustration, maybe hinting at Nick's jealousy, at the sheer volume of experiences that are going on next door. Another word that gets repeated an awful lot in this section is his, the repeated pronoun his, obviously referring to Gatsby. Nick's incessant repetition of this word adds to this sense of excess, that everything is excessive. Maybe there's a sense here of disbelief that just one man can own so many goods. His boats, his Rolls Royce, his beach. Okay, this man owns a beach. Maybe also, and this is something that you might want to reflect on when you've read more of the novel, maybe also it hints at Nick's growing obsession with his neighbour. You know, he mentions, not by name, but he uses this pronoun an awful lot here in this section. Next, I'm interested in this phrase, his two motorboats slit the waters of the Sound. That's an example of sibilance, a repeated S sound, a repeated S sound, which mimics the swooshing sound of the sea and really serves to make Nick's image come to life. And we're going to look at some other poetic images a bit later on in the section too. Next we get this quite unusual word, a low frequency word, cataracts, which actually means waterfalls. so drawing aquaplanes over cataracts of foam. This lyrically describes this imagined scene. Nick is quite lyrical here in his descriptions. And this poetic quality, so we've got sibilance, we've got this quite poetic lyrical line. This also reminds us that, remember, Nick is a writer. Nick sets up this novel by saying that he is a writer, he's trying to write. And so perhaps that's why we can expect some of these more poetic turns of phrase. The next simile, which you may or may not think is very poetic, while his station wagon scampered like a brisk yellow bug. Again, this is an insect image. We had the moth earlier, now we've got bugs. This again hints at Nick's quite aloof, condescending view of the scene, that the goings on and the people next door are beneath him. They're like insects, perhaps. We've got more syndetic listing highlighted there, more uses of and. Again, drawing attention to the sheer number of people that Gatsby has working for him. He's got 8 servants, including a gardener. So that sense of excess, again, is emphasised by this syndetic listing, perhaps. Finally, in terms of our close analysis, we've got this phrase, repairing the ravages. This repeated consonant sound, that's an example of alliteration. So we've got that R sound, that R sound repeated there. Again, it's quite a poetic phrase, but it's also one that's quite harsh and dismissive. That rasping R sound reflects Nick's impression of his neighbour's house being ravaged, or perhaps even ruined by these parties. Okay, I'm just going to give a few seconds here to show you some of these narrative features that I've spoken to you about and their effects. Please do pause on the screen at any point in order to take notes or to look at these more carefully. There's the first 3. And then the next 4. And the final 3 there on that screen. Okay, I hope that has been useful, and I'd just like to leave you with 3 things to consider from this video. Firstly, think about how does Nick's tone actually change over the course of the novel. That section's quite early on, so keep looking at Nick's tone throughout the rest of the novel. Secondly, what's the significance of Nick's references to Gatsby's high-speed possessions, these motorboats, a Rolls-Royce? Bear in mind this is particularly significant at the time because the motor car was quite a new invention. And finally, track Nick's attitude. A, towards women, we noted that quite dismissive word girls earlier, and B, towards Gatsby throughout the rest of the novel, and think about what you learn about him. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.